Hi everyone, so this week we have a really interesting topic. What is IF? So if you're looking at maybe having a better control of your insulin levels, controlling sugar levels in your blood, maybe losing some weight, losing some fat actually, you can do something called intermittent fasting. This is starting to become a thing that I've known about for a while, but you're starting to hear about it a little bit more and more, so I wanted to explain a little bit conceptually how this works. This might be a two-parter depending on how long this takes, because there's a lot of good information about it and it's hard to get it all in one shot. But we'll try to talk about this briefly. So what does intermittent fasting mean? All it means is you're going to take maybe like one day a week or a couple of days a week that you decide to do. You're actually just compressing the time that you're eating food into a small band of maybe 6 to 8 hours. So let's say conceptually it would work something like this. You have dinner tonight and then you don't eat anything. You go to bed, you wake up in the morning the next day, and you go all the way until maybe 12 o'clock or maybe like 2 o'clock the next day, and that's when you have your first meal on the next day. So effectively you've done a fair number of hours where you haven't put food in your body. And there's a lot of benefits of doing this actually. It's kind of interesting. So that would be your first meal of the day, and then your second one would probably just be dinner on that day. So you probably only have 2 meals in that day, and the dinner might be maybe 7 or 8 o'clock, something like that. And then the next day you could go back to eating normally. You could just kind of choose one day a week and do this, and if you have the wherewithal or you want to do it more than one day a week, you could try to do that as well. But there's a lot of good benefits from this as far as, even people with diabetes and type 2 diabetes and things like that with their insulin levels and stuff. There's a lot of interesting sort of dynamics that can come out of this as well. So let me just explain conceptually what's going on. When people are gaining fat in their body, these are the two hormones that are really the big players in it. Insulin is the biggest player and cortisol is the second one, to a lesser degree. So those are the two hormones that really have a big effect on whether your body's going to be putting fat on or not. So it doesn't really have anything to do with how many calories you take in or trying to avoid fat to not get fat, which is the last thing you should be doing. You're actually supposed to be eating lots of fat, but the good kind of fat. And I mentioned that in some of the other Monday health tips. Okay, so once again, good fats are coconut oil, extra virgin raw coconut oil, olive oil, grapeseed oil if you're cooking with it, avocado oil. Has to be good raw, organic, natural sources obviously, and just eating the avocados themselves. Free-range eggs, the yolk in the free-range eggs is it's pretty much like a multivitamin with a good fat source. Free-range chickens, those kind of things, and beef, all that kind of stuff. Grass-fed beef if you can get it. All the good kind of healthy fats, those are all great. The biggest challenge creating weight gain is the refinement of the carbohydrates that we eat. So carbohydrates in themselves aren't necessarily a bad thing, but if you really think about it conceptually, so when you hear somebody talk about an essential something, so they're saying you need essential what? Fatty acids. So that would be like your omega-3s and stuff you have to get from fish or fowl, or taking our own omega-3 oil, that kind of thing. Those are essential fatty acids. That means your body can't produce them, so you have to get them from the diet. And the other one is essential amino acids. So there's 8 or 10 or 12 depending on who you're talking to, but there's a number of amino acids which are building blocks of protein that you actually have to get from the diet because your body doesn't produce it. You've never heard of anything called an essential carbohydrate, right? No such thing as essential carbohydrates, so you really actually don't have to eat them because your body can make them, really, in the end. So your diet could actually just be proteins and fats, basically, if you're good sources of those unnaturally. So this is the concept. If I eat a carbohydrate, the refined ones have a really bad tendency to increase our blood sugar in a very fast way. So there's something called the glycemic index, and there's also a newer measurement called the glycemic load. So glycemic index is kind of like how fast something you eat makes your blood sugar go up, basically. The glycemic load is sort of like how much push is there behind that, like comparing, let's say, a cup of ice cream as compared to a cup of watermelon. The watermelon is, it's very there's a lot of water and there's a lot of fiber and stuff in it. So even though it's the same amount, there's way more glycemic load in the ice cream. Like it'll be pushing that for a longer period of time because the watermelon really doesn't have that much calorie carbohydrate in it, basically. So anyway, those two things put together kind of give you an idea of how much of a push as changing your blood sugar will happen when you eat these things. So if you've read a book called Wheat Belly or Grain Brain, all these kind of guys, they're basically saying that a piece of white bread or a piece of whole wheat, quote unquote, healthy complex carbohydrates, they spike your blood sugar pretty much just as bad as sugar does, and like if white table sugar, which is horrible, right? So some of those things even spike it even more. So, you know, like a Snickers bar apparently has a lower glycemic index than a piece of toast, right? Because probably there's a lot of fats in it, and fats actually slow down the intake of the carbohydrates, the digestion, and those kind of things. So it's kind of an interesting thing, but the speed of your blood sugar kind of going up has a big effect on how much of it there's a big spike of your insulin. So here's sort of like your resting blood sugar levels, and this is like your insulin. Let's say you're fasting right now, they're kind of at a low level. The graphs aren't going to be exact, but just conceptually, right? So just thinking about the fact that I'm going to be putting a refined carbohydrate in my mouth, my insulin level is actually probably going to go up before I even eat it. But anyway, so I eat something with the refined carbohydrates, and the insulin levels or my blood sugar levels are going to go way up really quickly. So to start bringing that down, insulin basically partitions the glucose to the different parts. So it's going to either put it in the fat cells or give it the muscle for some muscle contractions, that kind of thing. But the idea is the insulin is storing your sugar for a future time where maybe you're not going to be eating. So basically, as the insulin level starts to go up, your blood sugar level is going to start coming down again. And usually there's a bit of an overspike because that went up so quick, your body produced too much insulin, and then your blood sugar actually goes a little lower than it's supposed to, and then it kind of gradually eventually comes back to normal again. That's sort of conceptually how that works. But insulin spikes in this manner like this are probably the biggest thing that causes aging in our body, actually. And it causes a lot of other bad things too. So you really want to keep your insulin under control. So if we go back in time to our hunter-gatherers, if, you know, they would probably eat some berries that they would find. You know, berries are like high in fiber, and back in the old days they weren't sort of like hybridized kind of things to make a lot of fruits and vegetables, and fruits, you know, like apples and these big sugary kind of watery fruits. So in the old days it probably would have just been like things they'd be picking in the forest, really small berries, those kind of things, pretty small amount, and it probably wouldn't do much to the blood sugar at all. So they'd be eating that, they'd be eating an animal if they found it, or they'd be eating like vegetables and leaves and stuff like that. So if they're eating basically like a fatty meal, like maybe they found an egg and they broke that open and were eating an egg, or if they're eating some protein. Basically, protein and fats, they'll only make your insulin level kind of go up a little bit like that when you eat them. They're not going to be a massive spike like if you eat like a piece of bread or something like that, or pasta or whatever. So that would be kind of low and slow. So the idea is there a way that we can actually keep our insulin levels lower and low? So better than that, you actually go through what we call one of these intermittent fasts.